So this is a short video lecture that focuses on how we are protecting species from an international standpoint. I've already mentioned the Endangered Species Act that was passed in the United States back in 1973, and it was amended in 1982 and 1988. And it's overseen by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as well as the National Marine Fisheries Service. So that's for the United States. Now let's take a look at what's being done at the international level. We have international treaties that have been established, and these treaties have been signed by countries throughout the world in order to work together to protect species. The first treaty I'd like to describe is CITES, C-I-T-E-S. It stands for the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. It is an international agreement between countries, and its aim is to ensure that the international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants does not threaten their survival. In a previous lecture, I mentioned how the black market has such a high price tag on things such as rhinoceros horns or elephant tusks. So this entity was created to have governments come together to collaborate and work to stop that illegal trade. In 1963, at a convention in Nairobi, Kenya, the concept of CITES was formulated. It took about 12 years, but in 1975, CITES was actually formed, and over 182 countries has joined CITES. Annually, international wildlife trade is estimated to be worth billions of dollars, and it includes hundreds of millions of plants and animal specimens. This trade is very diverse, ranging from live animals and plants to a vast array of wildlife products derived from them, including food products, exotic leather goods, wooden musical instruments, timber, and medicines. CITES also brings together law enforcement officers from wildlife authorities, national parks, customs, and police agencies to collaborate on efforts to combat this wildlife crime targeted at animals such as the elephant and the rhino. So it's more than just governments coming together. CITES also coordinates, like I mentioned, law enforcement, police, customs, and works to make sure we can try to stop illegal trade. Roughly about 5,800 species of animals and 30,000 species of plants are protected by CITES against overexploitation through international trade. They are listed in 3 appendices that were developed by CITES with collaboration with the 182 countries. The species are grouped in accordance to how threatened they are by international trade. These groups include primates, whales, dolphins, and porpoises, sea turtles, parrots, corals, cacti, and orchids. There are some cases where only a subspecies or a geographically separate population of a species is listed. It may be that that species is an endemic species and only located in a very specific location within one country. So these 3 appendixes are listed on the screen in front of you. Appendix 1 includes species that are threatened with extinction. Trade in specimens of these species is permitted only in exceptional circumstances. Appendix 2 includes species not necessarily threatened with extinction, but in which trade must be controlled in order to avoid consumption of them as a resource and impair their survival. This appendix contains species that are protected in at least one country and has asked other CITES countries for assistance in controlling the trade. And that's what Appendix 3 is. About every 2 to 3 years, these lists of species in the 3 different appendices are updated after doing thorough review. So I pulled together some pictures of species that are currently being protected under the CITES International Agreement. In 1973, the American alligator was transferred to the Appendix 2 from Appendix 1 because it successfully has recovered in numbers here in the United States. So that's one of the success species that we have under the CITES Treaty. In 1976, several species of primates, including lemurs, were added to the Appendix 1 list as being ones that truly do need to be protected. In 1981, sea turtles were transferred from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1 because of their declining population numbers. In 1987, several species of fruit bats were added to the list in Appendix 2. In 1989, amid declining wild elephant numbers, the parties transferred the African elephant to Appendix 1, which effectively banned any commercial international trade of elephant ivory. So since 1989, this elephant has been protected and illegal, and ivory trade is considered illegal. In 1992, the black bear found here in the U.S. was added to Appendix 2, mainly because of its exploitation for use in medicinal purposes. In 1997, the contributing governments involved with the sites agreed to move several populations of the African elephant to Appendix 2, as it appeared they had successfully rebounded in the 1990s due to increased protection. In addition, the governments passed a resolution to develop a monitoring system for the African and Asian elephant population to keep track of what was going on with them. In the year 2000, there were some species-specific issues that took center stage for the African elephant. After implementing some monitoring systems that were recommended a few years earlier, it was determined that the data was invaluable in reference to the increased elephant trade and poaching of elephants in the wild. In 2004, there was increased protection for several large marine species, such as the dolphin, shark, and some other specific species of fish, and they were added to Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. In 2007, marine species proposals seemed to dominate the international meeting for CITES. The spiny dogfish, the porbeagle shark, the European eel, different corals, sawfishes, and several other marine species were added to the CITES appendices for protection. The only one that was actually added was the European eel and the sawfish. In 2013, the United States submitted a proposal to transfer the polar bear to Appendix 1, thereby providing the highest level of protection available and prohibiting any commercial trade of the species. Additionally, the United States has submitted some co-sponsor proposals to protect numerous species of turtles and sharks. With the sharks, it's mainly because of the shark finning that's going on right now. So I've tried to share with you a timeline of how CITES has continued to add certain species to their list of protections under Appendix 1, 2, and 3, how those species may have shifted from an Appendix 2 to an Appendix 1 to be more protected, and vice versa, how some species have recovered and they've shifted from Appendix 1 to Appendix 2. So CITES is a good organization of numerous countries that are coming together collaboratively to work for the international protection of species. Here in the U.S., one of the ways that we protect ecosystems is by setting aside public lands. So we break them into three categories: multiple use lands, moderately restricted use lands, and restricted use lands. Multiple use lands include our national forests and our national resource lands. We have over 156 national forests in the United States and 22 national grasslands. These forests can be used for logging, mining, livestock grazing, farming, oil and gas extraction, recreation, hunting, fishing, and conservation. The four-wheeler ATV use is restricted, though, in these national forests to only allow them on designated routes. So multiple use lands means that the land's been set aside for protection, but they do allow mining and logging and oil extraction and some other uses there. So when you go visit a national forest, it doesn't mean that it's strictly for camping. They do allow extraction of resources from those designated protected areas. Now, the Bureau of Land Management is an agency that manages our national resource lands, which is also considered a multiple use land, and the Bureau of Land Management works to provide a secure supply of energy and minerals by managing these lands. So oil and gas extraction, mining, and rangelands for livestock. The moderately restricted use category includes national wildlife refuges. These are managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and currently we have over 524 national wildlife refuges located throughout the United States. These are habitats that are supposed to be protected, and they are big game habitats. You have large predator species that live in some of these areas. There are permissible activities including sport hunting and sport fishing, commercial fishing, oil and gas development, mining, logging, and grazing. There's also the option for some military activities as well as farming on some of these lands, as long as the Department of the Interior finds such uses compatible. So if anyone wants to try to do any mining or oil extraction on a national wildlife refuge, they have to submit a proposal and a permit request to the Department of the Interior and get approval for it. One of the newsworthy instances of this is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge that has been under pressure to be opened up for oil and gas drilling over the past 20 years. And over that time frame, the Department of the Interior as well as Congress has shut down the attempts to allow oil and drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, primarily because it's a very sensitive, fragile environment, and any potential for oil spill could threaten that environment significantly. Restricted use lands include national parks, National Wilderness Preservation System. These lands, you're only allowed to do hiking, fishing, camping, horseback riding. You are not allowed to do any kind of logging or livestock grazing or mining or any kind of commercial activity on these lands. These lands have specifically been set aside to protect them from human impact. The National Wilderness Preservation System is managed by the National Park Service. 42% of the lands are managed by the National Park Service. You also have the National Forest Service that's involved with managing these lands, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the Bureau of Land Management. So you have multiple agencies that are involved with managing the restricted use lands. This is a map depicting the location of our national parks and wilderness preserves in orange throughout the United States. Most of them are located in western United States. This is Yellowstone National Park and Grand Teton National Park, Glacier National Park. We also have Yosemite National Park as well, which is located in, Northern California, and Sequoia National Park, Florida Everglades National Park, and the list goes on. This is actually Smoky National Park. So those are the orange colors represented on the map. The greens represent national forests, which we have much more green depicted on the map going across the United States. And the blues are the National Wildlife Refuge locations that are depicted on this map as well. Please recall that national parks are restricted use. National forests are multiple use. You can mine and do oil and gas extraction in these national forest lands. And then the National Wildlife Refuges in blue are considered to be moderately restricted use. So keep an eye on where most of these lands are located in the distribution across the United States, because the next slide I'm going to put up on the screen focuses on where our mineral deposits are throughout the United States. And oftentimes it overlaps where we have federal lands that have been designated. Here's a map of moderate mineral deposits in orange, rich mineral deposits in red, and the black hatch marks indicate where we have an overlap between federally preserved land and resources being available. Our federal public lands contain about 20% of our oil reserves, 30% of our natural gas reserves, and 40% of our coal reserves. In addition, 40% of our commercial forests and large amounts of minerals. To wrap up this series, the 3 principles to protect ecosystems are listed on your screen. Map and inventory the world's existing ecosystems, locate and protect endangered and threatened species, and seek to restore ecosystems that have been impacted by humans.